Hey beautiful people, this video talks about what's the difference between innovation and improvement. I want to cover the fundamental difference between improving existing processes and creating new value. How do you learn how to recognize opportunities for each different approach and when to focus on innovation versus improvement. Some improvements actually block innovation. It's important to be aware of what those are. There's a fantastic relationship between constraints and breakthroughs. I want to help you learn how to understand and observe those. By the end of this video, you'll be able to distinguish between innovation and improvement, and you'll be able to see how to identify opportunities for each approach. In my book, The Innovation Mindset, I talk about the idea of a practice impact model. And here's why this is important, is we tend to think of innovation as being adding value, which is great and right, but we also tend to think of it as something magical and amazing that happens. And again, if you go to Google and you look up innovation, you're going to see light bulbs everywhere, because we think of it in terms of brilliant people having light bulbs go off in their head and coming in with amazing ideas. I don't think that's right. I don't think that makes sense, and I don't think it's valuable. And here's why. Because I fundamentally believe that innovation is a practice. And innovation is a practice that you and everyone else around you has the capacity to learn how to do it. So when I talk about something being a practice, if you play a sport, if you practice a musical instrument, if you run, if you exercise, you have practices. If you cook, if you garden, you have practices for how you do those things. And those practices are things that they're almost out of mind for you at this point. Driving is a practice. Actually, driving is a great example of a practice. So when you get into your car, you don't sit down in your car and go, okay, have I checked my mirrors? Have I checked my side mirrors? Have I checked my back mirror? Have I made sure that it's in park? Have I made sure that I put my seatbelt on? What you do if you've been driving for more than a couple of years, you do all of those instinctively and automatically because you've embodied them as practices to make sure that you're going to be safe on the road and that other people are going to be safe around you. You also have practices for when you're actually driving, and your practice is make sure that I stay in line with the speed limit, make sure that I'm aware of the other cars that are around me. You've got a whole series of practices that you are doing almost automatically, so that you can have a conversation with another person who's in the car, so that you can talk on the phone, hands-free, so that you can also listen to music as you're in your car. And those practices are there with you all of the time. If you can start looking at innovation as being a practice, the same way that driving is a practice for you, you can begin to open the doors for yourself and for your people to be able to really start thinking about innovation. So the big difference between improvement and innovation is improvement makes situations and processes better. Innovation finds opportunities to add new value. Now here's the interesting thing about those two, is they're both supported by practices. They're both supported by practices that can be observed, that can be learned, and that can be embodied. And so we're going to talk about some of those practices. The practice impact model in my book talks about the idea of deliberate practices. So let's talk about what some of those deliberate practices can be for you. Now, here's the other thing to remember about practices is when you started driving a car first, it took you anywhere from 3 to 6 months to kind of get reasonably proficient and to take off those good old L or R plates, depending on what country you're in. But if you allow yourself that same level of patience when it comes to learning your innovation practices, you're going to give yourself an opportunity to actually be able to embody and learn new practices. One of the practices, I'm going to talk about 3 or 4 of them just to give you an idea. There's actually about 15 of them, but let's just touch on some of them right now. One of the practices is understanding how innovation can emerge from constraints. So what we tend to think about when we think about constraints is we tend to try and eliminate them or try and fix them. So a constraint might be a project that you want to do, but the resources you have for it aren't sufficient to be able to do it. Or you don't have enough people, you don't have enough financing, you don't have enough time. Those are all constraints that you're having to deal with as you launch into pretty much any project at work or any department that you're running and operating. I've heard people do lots of complaints about what I call resource bleeding, where they're basically saying, I can't do anything because I don't have enough resources. If you start thinking about one of the fundamental practices of innovation as your ability to be able to see opportunities where there are constraints and to be able to make offers, to take advantage of those opportunities, to be able to deal with those opportunities, what you're doing is you are dealing with the constraints as they are. You're also questioning them, but you're not letting them stop you from moving ahead. So let's take an example. Your boss has laid out the KPIs for the year or the OKRs for the year. You see that there's a beautiful, juicy project in there that you would just love to dabble in and have some fun with. You realize that what's being asked in terms of the OKRs, the KPIs, is huge relative to the resources that you have. Most people will go, well, that means that I can't actually do anything about it. If you're beginning to start building innovation as a practice for yourself, what you're doing is you're figuring out what is the size of offer that I can make that will allow me to be able to contribute value and deliver an innovation opportunity for me and my team and for my boss if I carve out a piece of that. Now, the conversation goes then, you go to your boss and you say, hey, look, I'm really interested in this KPI that we have, and I'm super excited about the fact that we are going after this new market, let's say. I obviously on my team don't have the capacity to be able to do all of that, but I recognize that there is one area that I believe that we can add a lot of value to. It might be analysis, it might be data analysis, it might be research, it might be customer engagement metrics, it might be customer interviews, it might be part of the product design group, depending on what department that you're in or what group you're working with or what team you're leading. But what it allows you to be able to do is, here's a small piece where I can add value. Now, if you open up that conversation with your boss, which is you're beginning to make an offer and you're saying, here's what I know I can do, this is what my team and I could deliver, this is the timeline we could deliver it in, this is the value I know that we could add. What your boss is doing there is they're then saying, wait, now this person's coming in my door making a pretty powerful offer to do a piece of this project. I'm either going to say to them, hey, look, I'm looking for someone who can really handle the whole thing, or I'm going to figure out how I can help them and support them into handling the whole thing. So every time you have one of those conversations that are oriented around making powerful offers where you see opportunities and refining and calibrating those opportunities to fit the resources and the constraints that you are having to deal with, what you're doing is you're opening the door for yourself to be able to be more innovative, to be able to get yourself promoted, to be able to have more resources allocated to you, to be able to do some of the things that you really want to do. So innovation is a practice that you can build through the small starting practice of actually making powerful offers to internal customers, people who you designate as customers, internal customers who you want to add value for. It's hard for some people to be able to go from the idea of I'm making a small offer with a lot of constraints to I'm innovating some amazing product that really transforms our market. But it's also really hard for people to be able to go from I'm getting into a car for the first time and I'm putting this gear shift into drive and I'm figuring out how to be able to move at the appropriate speed without killing people or crashing the car, to I'm now able to drive on a German Autobahn at 85 kilometers an hour. That seems like a big stretch when you're first sitting in a car and you're putting the gear shift into drive. But allow yourself time to begin to practice and see how these practices accumulate over time. What you will find is you're going to move up the practice impact model and you're going to move from deliberate practice to richer conversations. You can already see that if you're going into your boss and you're making an offer to even do a small part of a KPI that they've talked about, and you're making a powerful offer around that, you're already having a richer conversation with that person. You begin to do richer conversations, better design, and you move yourself to co-inventive processes. And over time, what you'll see is you begin to build practices for yourself for being more proficient, for identifying better opportunities, for being able to deliver more value, for being able to design and standards, to be able to co-design metrics, and you're able to negotiate better, and you'll be able to create more opportunities, not just for yourself, but for the people who work with you, to be able to actually add value. You start off with something small that looks like it's an improvement offer, and you're actually moving to something much bigger, which becomes an innovation offer, because the underlying capacity to be able to improve and to be able to innovate is actually the same capacity. It's the capacity to be able to listen, to be able to identify patterns, to be able to make powerful offers, to be able to negotiate those offers so they deliver enormous satisfaction and value for your customer. And as you start doing that, you will find that your own innovation capacity increases over time, as does that of your team. Name one deliberate practice that you are going to start doing over the next month or 2 or 3 months, and list it for me down in the comments. And let's get started talking about deliberate practice that we are looking to build as a community and as individuals. I want to hear about it, I want you to talk about it, and I want to help you build them. As you embark on this journey, I really invite you to do the Innovation Readiness Assessment. There's a link in the comments below. It's totally free. Get in there, do it for yourself, see where you are on the innovation capacity building ladder, and get started on the journey, because it's a really fun one and I welcome you to it.